The sun rose slowly over the small town of Cedarwood, spilling soft golden light over modest homes and quiet streets. Birds chirped in the trees lining the cracked sidewalks, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of morning dew and freshly baked bread from Mrs. Thompson's bakery on Main Street. In one of the older apartment complexes near the edge of town, 12-year-old Ethan was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the edge of his small bed, tying the worn laces of his sneakers. They had seen better days, the soles were frayed, and a tiny hole had formed near the toe, but Ethan treated them with the utmost care, knowing they were all he had. Ethan's mother, Clara, was in the tiny kitchen, preparing breakfast. The apartment was humble, peeling paint on the walls, a small round table with 2 chairs, and hand-me-down appliances that hummed and rattled as they worked. Despite the simplicity, Clara filled the room with warmth and routine. She hummed softly as she fried eggs and toasted bread, occasionally glancing at her son with a mixture of pride and worry. Money was always tight, but Clara had taught Ethan the importance of hope, honesty, and perseverance, even in the face of hardship. "Morning, Mom," Ethan said, his voice bright despite the early hour. "Morning, honey," Clara replied, placing a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. "Big day today?" Ethan nodded eagerly. "Yeah. I'm walking to the library after school to check out some books. You know, stories about shoes and city life." He smiled, brushing a strand of messy brown hair from his forehead. His eyes sparkled with curiosity, a sharp contrast to the worn edges of his world. Breakfast was simple but nourishing. Clara made sure of it, packing a small sandwich in Ethan's backpack for later. She watched him eat, silently counting the days until she could find better work, better opportunities, and a way to give her son more than just hope and dreams. After breakfast, Ethan laced up his jacket against the crisp morning air and stepped outside. The streets of Cedarwood were just coming to life, the mailman wheeling his cart along the pavement, neighbors waving at one another, kids walking to school with backpacks bouncing. There was a rhythm to the town, slow but steady, comforting in its predictability. Ethan loved this town, loved the sense of community, but he also dreamed beyond it. He wanted to see the bigger world, the kind he glimpsed in magazines and advertisements plastered along the city streets a few miles away. As he walked, he passed the old downtown plaza, where the luxury boutiques that had recently opened gleamed behind glass windows. One display caught his attention immediately, a pair of bright leather sneakers, shiny and perfect, unlike anything he'd ever seen. Ethan stopped, pressed his nose against the glass, and admired them. He traced the outline of the shoes with his finger, imagining how they would feel, how they would make him feel confident and special, even if just for a moment. A small group of wealthy teenagers passed by, laughing and chatting about their latest gadgets and weekend plans. Ethan's gaze lingered on the sneakers a little longer, feeling the sharp contrast between his reality and theirs. He adjusted his backpack and kept walking, a mix of admiration and longing tugging at his heart. Despite the difference in their worlds, Ethan held no resentment. Instead, he felt curiosity and hope, imagining a life where he might one day walk into such a store not as a visitor, but as someone who belonged. By the time he reached the Cedarwood Middle School, the sun was climbing higher, casting warm light on the brick walls and neatly trimmed lawns. Ethan joined his friends on the playground, laughing at jokes and sharing stories, but his mind often wandered back to the shoes. He imagined himself wearing them, walking proudly through the streets of the city, feeling the soft leather under his fingers and the smooth soles beneath his feet. Inside his classroom, the teacher, Mrs. Harper, greeted him with a smile. She noticed the slight sparkle in his eyes today, the way he seemed more alive than usual. "Ethan," she said kindly, "you're full of energy this morning." "I guess I'm just thinking about the library books I'll check out after school," he replied, a small grin spreading across his face. Mrs. Harper nodded knowingly. "Keep dreaming, Ethan. Dreams are the first step to something bigger." The bell rang, and Ethan settled into his seat, glancing out the window at the distant horizon where the city skyline peeked through the morning haze. It was a reminder of the larger world beyond Cedarwood, a world full of possibilities waiting for those brave enough to step into it. During lunch, Ethan shared a small sandwich with his best friend, Jacob, who always admired Ethan's optimism. "You really think you'll ever get those shoes?" Jacob asked, half joking, half curious. Ethan shrugged, smiling. "Maybe someday. But even if I don't, I like imagining it. Makes life a little brighter." The day passed slowly, filled with lessons, laughter, and small moments of curiosity. By the time the final bell rang, Ethan was already planning his walk to the city, saving every spare coin he had, imagining the day he would step into a luxury store. The contrast between his modest life and the shimmering displays downtown fueled a quiet determination in him, a desire not just for shoes, but for experience, dignity, and hope. As he walked home that evening, the sky painted in soft shades of orange and pink, Ethan paused once more in front of the store window. The shoes gleamed, bathed in the warm light of the fading sun. He whispered softly to himself, one day, back at the apartment, Clara was waiting with a warm dinner and a gentle smile. She asked about his day, listened to his stories, and tucked him into bed, reminding him that no matter how small their world seemed, love and hope could make it vast. Ethan drifted to sleep thinking of shoes, city streets, and possibilities, unaware that the next day would begin a journey that neither he nor the wealthy owner of that luxury store could ever forget. Ethan lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of his small bedroom, the dim glow of a single lamp casting shadows across the worn walls. His mind wandered back to the luxury store, the sneakers gleaming behind the polished glass, like little pieces of a dream just out of reach. He could almost feel the smooth leather beneath his fingers, the soft weight of them as he imagined walking down city streets with confidence and pride. These weren't just shoes to him, they represented possibility, a step toward a world he had only glimpsed in magazines and advertisements. He reached over to his small desk, cluttered with schoolbooks and sketches, and pulled out a crumpled notebook. On its pages were drawings of shoes, some inspired by fashion catalogs he had collected, others entirely from his imagination. Each sketch was labeled with careful notes: red leather with white laces, perfect for running fast and feeling brave, or black sneakers, soft soles, make you feel unstoppable. Every line he drew was a quiet rebellion against the limitations of his world, a way to imagine something larger than his apartment, his small town, and even his modest wardrobe. The thought of those shoes stayed with him even as he drifted into dreams. In his imagination, he walked through streets lined with tall buildings, windows sparkling in the sun. He imagined walking past people who didn't notice him, yet he felt proud, dignified, and respected. Even though he had never owned a pair like that, the dreams were enough to lift him out of the everyday hardships: long walks to school, hand-me-down clothes, and the occasional teasing from classmates who didn't understand his world. The next morning, Ethan woke before the sun again, driven by the same quiet determination that had carried him so far. After breakfast, he carefully counted the few coins he had saved in a small jar under his bed. Each coin represented a tiny step toward his goal, not just shoes, but the experience of stepping into a world that felt unreachable. His mother, Clara, watched him with a mixture of concern and pride, recognizing the spark in her son's eyes. "You're dreaming big again, aren't you?" she asked softly, her voice gentle but steady. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, Mom. I want to see the store, just for a little while. I promise I'll be careful." Clara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I know you will, honey. Just remember, dreams are important, but they don't have to cost anything to be real." With that blessing, Ethan set off toward the city streets once more, his small backpack bouncing on his shoulders. As he walked, he passed posters advertising the latest sneakers, glossy pages torn from fashion magazines fluttering in shop windows, and social media advertisements glowing on smartphone screens carried by teenagers. Every image reminded him of the life he didn't have, but rather than discouraging him, it fueled his determination and imagination. Along the way, he stopped at the local library, a small but cozy building with shelves stacked high with books. He loved reading about stories of ambition, creativity, and courage, tales of people who had started with nothing and built extraordinary lives. Ethan often drew parallels between those stories and his own small, determined steps toward a dream. Books about inventors, athletes, and artists filled him with hope, and he clung to the belief that passion and determination could take him far, even beyond the streets of Cedarwood. At lunchtime, Ethan would sit on a bench outside the school, taking out a small notebook to jot down ideas. He wrote little notes about how he could save more coins, the route he might take to the store without getting lost, and the exact shoes he hoped to see. He imagined the smell of polished leather, the quiet hum of soft music in the store, and the gentle sparkle of display lights reflecting off pristine shelves. For Ethan, these details weren't just fantasies, they were plans forming in the mind of a boy determined to step into a bigger world. Even his friends began to notice his quiet focus. Jacob, his best friend, asked one afternoon, "Why do you keep thinking about those shoes all the time?" Ethan looked up, a serious gleam in his eyes. "Because it's not really about the shoes, Jacob. It's about seeing the world differently. It's about feeling like maybe I can belong somewhere bigger, even just for a moment." Jacob nodded slowly, understanding more than words could express. Ethan's dream was bigger than fashion, it was hope, ambition, and the courage to imagine beyond circumstances. As the school day ended, Ethan walked back toward his apartment with a small smile, thinking about tomorrow, the next opportunity, the next step. He imagined himself entering the luxury store, feeling the smooth floors under his shoes, quietly admiring the displays, and soaking in the atmosphere of possibility. For him, every small coin saved, every careful step, and every quiet moment of dreaming was a victory in itself. When he arrived home, Clara was waiting with warm soup on the table. She noticed the sparkle in his eyes, the faint excitement that had nothing to do with toys or gadgets. "You really believe in those dreams of yours, don't you?" she asked, smiling gently. Ethan nodded. "I do, Mom. And one day, I'll see them." Clara reached across the table and held his hand. "I believe in you too, honey. That's all that matters." That night, as Ethan lay in bed once more, he visualized the shoes, the store, and the path beyond Cedarwood. The world felt vast and full of possibilities, even if he had little to his name. In that quiet room, lit only by the soft glow of a lamp, hope and determination filled the space more fully than any luxury ever could, setting the stage for a journey that would change both his life and the life of someone far wealthier than he could have imagined. The city skyline shimmered in the late afternoon sun as Ethan walked the crowded streets, his small sneakers padding softly on the pavement. The hum of traffic mixed with distant conversations, music from street performers, and the occasional honk of impatient drivers. Everything felt larger than life, taller buildings, brighter lights, and a bustle that Cedarwood had never offered. Yet amid the chaos, Ethan's eyes were fixed on one destination, the luxury shoe store he had dreamed about for months. The store stood at the corner of a busy avenue, its polished glass windows gleaming in the fading light. The interior was visible even from the outside, sleek displays of shoes arranged like treasures, soft lighting highlighting every curve and color, and the faint scent of leather wafting through the slightly ajar door. Ethan paused at the threshold, his heart racing. He adjusted the straps of his backpack and took a deep breath, summoning courage. Today, he would step into a world he had only imagined. As he pushed the glass door open, a soft chime announced his entrance. The air inside was warmer, perfumed with the subtle scent of luxury leather and polish. Smooth hardwood floors reflected the gentle overhead lights, and mirrored walls amplified the grandeur. The shoes on display were mesmerizing, sleek leather sneakers in shades of deep black, crimson, and navy, sparkling designer boots, and elegant loafers that seemed to whisper stories of sophistication and success. Ethan's eyes widened, and a quiet gasp escaped his lips. A salesperson, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a crisp uniform, approached him with a polite smile. "Hello, welcome to Marquette Shoes. Can I help you find something today?" Ethan shook his head gently, his voice barely above a whisper. No. I just wanted to see them. The woman studied him for a moment, noticing the scuffed sneakers and worn clothes. She maintained her professionalism but couldn't help a fleeting expression of curiosity. Of course, she said, stepping aside. Feel free to look around. Ethan wandered slowly through the aisles, his fingers brushing lightly against the edges of display boxes, careful not to disturb anything. The shoes were more beautiful than he had ever imagined, the leather soft yet firm, the stitching immaculate, and each pair exuding an elegance he had only glimpsed in magazines. He knelt to inspect a pair of bright red sneakers, tracing the design with reverence, imagining how it would feel to lace them up and walk with a newfound confidence. He didn't notice the quiet conversation happening at the far end of the store. The store owner, Mr. Harrison Marquette, a man in his late 40s with perfectly tailored suits and an air of quiet authority, had entered. He observed Ethan from a distance, initially assuming him to be a casual passerby. But there was something different about the boy, an aura of humility and genuine admiration that set him apart from the usual customers. Harrison's life had been built on precision, business acumen, and relentless ambition. Luxury was not just a product for him, it was a symbol of achievement, a testament to the years of work, strategy, and sacrifice. Yet as he watched Ethan, he felt an unexpected tug at something long dormant inside him, a memory of his own childhood, simpler times, and the innocence he had long since left behind. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his exploration, unaware of the gaze upon him. He marveled at a pair of navy leather sneakers with gleaming white soles, imagining himself walking through cedarwood with them, feeling just for a moment, untouchably confident and free. Every shoe seemed to tell a story, adventures on city streets, dances at school events, afternoons spent chasing dreams. In that quiet reverence, the store transformed from a retail space into a world of possibility, a portal to a life that seemed distant but achingly desirable. A subtle contrast filled the air, the polished, controlled luxury of the store versus the worn, humble reality Ethan carried on his small frame. Yet there was no sense of arrogance or entitlement in his demeanor, only curiosity, respect, and unspoken admiration. Harrison noticed this immediately. Most people in his stores walked with the confidence of those who could afford anything, yet here was a boy whose joy was untainted by wealth, whose eyes reflected pure wonder rather than desire for possession. Harrison quietly moved closer, keeping a respectful distance, observing Ethan as he knelt by the red sneakers once again. There was a gentle nervousness in the boy's posture, his fingers hovering slightly above the leather, as if afraid to touch perfection. Harrison's heart softened unexpectedly. Here was a reminder that value wasn't in money, but in gratitude and awe. The soft background music in the store played a slow, melodic tune, and Ethan's small voice whispered to himself. If only I could just wear them for a day. His words were fragile, yet filled with longing and hope. Harrison felt an unusual lump in his throat, a mix of empathy and something he hadn't experienced in years, emotional vulnerability. As Ethan moved toward the boots display, a small mishap occurred. His backpack brushed against a display, causing a faint click. A nearby clerk frowned and stepped toward him, voice sharp. "Hey! Be careful, kid. You can't just touch everything." Ethan's face flushed crimson. I am sorry," he stammered, stepping back. "I didn't mean to." His words trailed off, but the sincerity in his voice was palpable. Harrison noticed immediately and subtly intervened, placing a hand on the clerk's shoulder. "It's all right," Harrison said calmly, his voice firm yet gentle. "He's just admiring them. No harm done." The clerk hesitated, then nodded, stepping back. Ethan looked up, relief flooding his face. He whispered a quiet, "Thank you," and Harrison simply nodded, watching the boy continue his exploration with renewed awe. As the afternoon light waned and the city outside started to glow with streetlights, Ethan lingered near the window display, tracing the contours of the shoes one last time. Harrison stayed at a respectful distance, witnessing a small miracle of perspective, a boy who could see value not in ownership, but in appreciation, not in wealth, but in wonder. The store, usually a place of commerce and transactions, had become for a moment a sanctuary of emotion, contrast, and human connection. And Harrison felt the first stirrings of something profound, an awareness that this encounter might change both their lives in ways he could not yet fully understand. Harrison Marquette sat in his corner office overlooking the city, the golden afternoon sun casting long shadows across the sleek mahogany desk. From this height, the streets below seemed smaller, almost insignificant compared to the empire he had built, a chain of high-end fashion stores, millions in annual revenue, and a reputation for perfection. His office was a testament to success. Leather-bound books lined the walls, abstract art adorned the panels, and every detail meticulously placed reflected wealth and authority. Yet today, Harrison felt a strange restlessness. The encounter with the boy earlier in his store replayed in his mind, refusing to fade into the background like other minor disruptions he had grown accustomed to. He thought about the way the boy had moved through the aisles, hesitant, respectful, filled with awe and curiosity rather than entitlement or arrogance. Most customers, especially those who could afford anything, walked in with confidence, sometimes bordering on arrogance, but this boy, there was a purity in his manner that Harrison hadn't seen in years. Harrison leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. He considered the contrasts, the boy's worn sneakers, scuffed and patched, against the pristine displays of luxury footwear, the excitement in his wide eyes versus the polished indifference of regular patrons, his humility, quiet yet profound, standing out amid the carefully curated opulence of the store. For a moment, Harrison's mind drifted, not to business, but to his own childhood. He had grown up in a wealthy household, but not one filled with warmth or emotional guidance. His father had been a stern man, always focused on numbers, deals, and appearances. Love and affection had been conditional, tied to achievement rather than inherent worth. Harrison had followed the same path, internalizing ambition and discipline, building wealth with relentless determination. Yet in his pursuit, he realized he had sacrificed connection, vulnerability, and the simple joys of childhood. Seeing Ethan reminded him of what he had lost, what he had never truly had. There was a pang of regret, almost painful in its intensity. The boy's wonder, his innocence, his respect for small joys, stirred emotions Harrison had long suppressed, longing, empathy, and even a quiet ache for simplicity. For the first time in years, he felt the human side of wealth, the part that money cannot buy. He recalled the boy's careful handling of the shoes, his whispered words, and the awe that had lit up his face. In that moment, Harrison realized that luxury, perfection, and accumulation meant nothing without human connection. The material world had been his life, yet here was a reminder that true value lay in emotional richness, empathy, and the bonds we form with others. Harrison's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, knocked lightly on the door. "Mr. Marquette, the quarterly reports," she began. Harrison waved her off, not in dismissiveness, but with a distracted smile. "Not now, Claire. Sit down for a moment," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Claire hesitated, sensing the unusual tone in his voice. "Then Saturday, is everything all right, sir?" Harrison exhaled slowly. "Yes, mostly. It's just, something happened in the store today. A boy came in. Just, observing, nothing more. But there was something about him. Something I can't quite explain." Claire tilted her head, curious. "A customer?" Harrison shook his head. "Not really. That's the point. He wasn't like other customers. He wasn't looking to buy, to impress, or to take. He admired. He respected. He appreciated. And it made me think, why haven't I felt like that in years?" For a moment, the office was silent, the city noise below muffled by the thick glass windows. Harrison's mind wandered to the little boy's eyes, wide with wonder, tracing the curves of the red sneakers with care. The innocence, the hope, the humility, it all struck a chord Harrison hadn't realized was still there. He felt tears welling up, though he quickly blinked them back. A man like him rarely allowed himself such vulnerabilities. Yet the feelings persisted, a longing for connection, for simplicity, for meaning beyond wealth. Claire watched him closely, sensing a rare vulnerability. "It sounds profound," she said softly. "Maybe it's a sign to slow down, or see things differently." Harrison nodded slowly, leaning back in his chair. "Perhaps. I've spent so long building and protecting my empire, chasing perfection and numbers, I forgot what it feels like to truly notice, to feel human. That boy reminded me of something important, something I lost long ago." He paused, reflecting on the contrast between the boy's modest life and his own opulent world. Harrison realized that despite his wealth, he often felt isolated, detached, and emotionally impoverished. Material success could impress and influence, but it could not provide warmth, empathy, or the kind of untainted joy that Ethan displayed. Harrison glanced at the wall of awards and plaques, symbols of his accomplishments. They were impressive, but hollow in this moment. He wanted to understand, to connect, to experience the world through eyes untainted by ego or expectation. And he knew, deep down, that the boy was his guide to rediscovering that perspective. Setting aside the reports and appointments for the afternoon, Harrison made a decision. He would follow the boy back into the store, not to interrogate, not to admonish, but to observe, to connect, to understand. This was unfamiliar territory for him, stepping out of the safe, calculated boundaries of his life. Yet it felt necessary. As the sun began to lower behind the city skyline, casting warm orange light across the office, Harrison felt a mixture of anticipation and vulnerability. For a man used to controlling every aspect of his environment, this unplanned encounter with innocence and humility was disarming, and profoundly transformative. For the first time in a long while, Harrison Marquette allowed himself to hope, not for profits or accolades, but for connection, empathy, and the possibility of changing not just a boy's life, but perhaps his own. The next day, Ethan returned to the city with the same quiet determination. He walked the streets with careful steps, saving every coin in his pocket, and planning his brief visit to the store once more. Inside Marquette's shoes, the displays gleamed just as they had yesterday, bathed in soft light that seemed to highlight their perfection. The polished floors reflected the boy's small sneakers as he walked tentatively, every step measured, careful not to disturb anything. Harrison, already present in the store, observed from a corner, his eyes following the boy's movements like a guardian rather than a businessman. He noticed subtle details that most would miss, the way Ethan's eyes lingered on a pair of deep blue sneakers, the slight hesitation before he reached out to touch the leather, the way his fingers hovered above the polished surfaces with reverence. Each movement spoke volumes, revealing a humility and respect that money could never buy. Ethan's fascination was silent, almost meditative. He crouched near a display of sleek black boots, tracing the stitching with careful fingers. His lips moved slightly, whispering words of admiration, dreams he hadn't yet spoken aloud. Harrison felt a lump in his throat. In the controlled, calculated world he occupied daily, he rarely encountered genuine wonder untainted by expectation or entitlement. And here it was, embodied in this small, determined boy. As Ethan moved on, his eyes caught a shiny pair of red leather sneakers. He knelt, brushing a speck of dust from one before delicately picking it up. Harrison quietly stepped closer, careful to remain unnoticed. Watching Ethan handle the shoes with such care, he felt an unexpected warmth, a connection forming without a word exchanged. The boy's joy was pure, not anchored in ownership, but in admiration, a rare and precious emotion Harrison hadn't realized he craved. For Harrison, it was a moment of reflection. He thought back to his childhood, when he had been pressured to succeed, to conform, to perform. There had been no room for admiration or simple wonder, only expectations and discipline. Seeing Ethan now, so free in his appreciation, awakened a longing Harrison had suppressed for decades, the desire to experience life through innocence, through unfiltered joy. The store was quiet, save for the soft hum of music and the gentle clink of shoes being adjusted on displays. Harrison watched Ethan move carefully, crouching to examine a pair of navy sneakers, brushing his fingers along the soft leather, his face lit with fascination. The boy didn't speak much, but his eyes told the story, a longing for beauty, a thirst for experience, a heart unburdened by cynicism. Harrison realized he had been missing these simple emotions in his own life, replaced by the constant drive for more sales, more recognition, more perfection. A sales clerk approached Ethan briefly, eyeing him with a hint of suspicion, but Harrison stepped forward just in time. "He's fine," he said softly, his voice calm yet authoritative. "He's just appreciating the craftsmanship." The clerk hesitated, then nodded. Ethan looked up, relief washing over his face, and whispered, "Thank you." Harrison smiled gently and nodded in return. That simple exchange, so small yet so meaningful, strengthened an unspoken bond. It was a bridge between worlds, one of innocence and hope, the other of wealth and authority. Ethan continued exploring the store, unaware of Harrison following at a respectful distance. He stopped to admire a display of sleek white sneakers, imagining himself walking through cedarwood, feeling pride, confidence, and possibility. Harrison observed quietly, his heart swelling with empathy. Here was a boy who understood the value of admiration, of dreaming, and of gratitude, qualities Harrison recognized he had long neglected. The connection between them deepened as the afternoon passed. Harrison saw how Ethan's eyes lit up at the smallest details, the stitching, the way the leather shimmered under the lights, the meticulous design of the soles. It was not the luxury itself that captivated the boy, but the story each pair seemed to tell, the dedication behind its creation, and the dreams it inspired. Harrison realized that Ethan's appreciation reflected a maturity and depth that many adults in his world lacked. At one point, Ethan paused near the window display, his fingers brushing the glass as he stared at the red sneakers once more. Harrison stepped closer, speaking softly, careful not to startle him. "Do you like them?" he asked, his voice gentle. Ethan turned slightly, surprised but not frightened. "Yes, very much," he said quietly. "I've never seen shoes like these before. They're amazing." Harrison smiled. "They are special. But you don't need to own them to appreciate them, right?" Ethan nodded slowly, a shy smile spreading across his face. "No, just seeing them is enough. It makes me happy." Harrison felt a profound realization. Here was a boy who found joy not in possession, but in admiration, a lesson Harrison himself had long forgotten. The connection was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else in the store, but it was powerful, a silent understanding between two very different lives. They continued in this quiet rhythm, Harrison observing, Ethan exploring, each aware of the other but not yet crossing the boundary into direct interaction. There was a sense of mutual respect forming, an emotional bridge between wealth and humility, experience and innocence, authority and hope. Harrison recognized that this moment was teaching him something he hadn't learned in decades, that human connection, empathy, and genuine admiration could surpass any material achievement. As the afternoon sun began to fade, casting warm amber light across the polished floors, Harrison realized he couldn't simply leave the boy to wander in awe without guidance or recognition. Yet he didn't want to disrupt the delicate balance of respect and admiration that had formed. Instead, he chose to remain close, a quiet presence, allowing Ethan to experience the wonder without interference, a guardian of his dreams, silently acknowledging their shared humanity. In that subtle connection, Harrison found a spark of transformation. He understood that wealth alone could not create this moment, it required vulnerability, attention, and empathy. Ethan, unknowingly, was teaching him a lesson more valuable than any business strategy or luxury acquisition, that observing, appreciating, and connecting with genuine innocence could rekindle the human spirit in ways money never could. By the time Ethan finally left the store, clutching the image of the red sneakers in his mind, Harrison stood by the door, his eyes following him. There was a quiet sense of anticipation, a feeling that this encounter was only the beginning. He had witnessed something rare and beautiful, a reminder of what truly mattered in life, and he knew deep down that he would not let this connection fade. The next afternoon, Ethan returned to the store, as he had done before, clutching his few coins in a small, worn pouch. The sun streamed through the city streets, casting long shadows on the bustling sidewalks. Inside Marquette shoes, everything gleamed, the polished floors, the perfectly arranged displays, the shimmering leather. Ethan's eyes lit up the moment he stepped in, his small hands hovering delicately over a display of sleek brown boots. Today, however, the atmosphere in the store was different. A wealthy customer, a sharply dressed woman with designer heels and an air of impatience, was arguing with a salesperson near the counter. "I said I want them in size 7, now," she snapped, her tone dripping with entitlement. The clerk hesitated, clearly intimidated, and Ethan felt a pang of anxiety at the tension in the room. As he quietly explored the aisles, a younger clerk noticed Ethan lingering near the most expensive displays. The boy's worn sneakers, patched and scuffed, contrasted sharply with the pristine environment, and the clerk's eyebrows furrowed. "Hey! What are you doing here?" the clerk demanded, his voice harsh. "This isn't a playground." Ethan froze, his fingers hovering just above a pair of polished shoes. I am just looking," he stammered, shrinking back. His heart raced, the color rising in his cheeks. The store that had always felt like a sanctuary now seemed intimidating, a place where wealth and power could overshadow curiosity and innocence. Harrison, who had been observing from the corner once more, immediately stepped forward. His presence was calm but commanding, and he placed a hand gently on the clerk's shoulder. "It's all right," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "He's not causing any trouble. Let him explore." The clerk hesitated, clearly frustrated, but nodded reluctantly. Ethan's relief was palpable, and he whispered, "Thank you," barely audible. Harrison nodded back, feeling a quiet surge of protectiveness toward the boy. Something about Ethan's humility and admiration stirred a paternal instinct he hadn't realized he possessed. But the situation escalated. The impatient woman at the counter turned her sharp gaze toward Ethan, misinterpreting his presence. "Who let this kid in here? Do you see how he's touching everything?" she exclaimed, her voice echoing across the store. "This is a high-end store, not a charity for children." Ethan's heart sank. He had never felt so small, so out of place. The contrast between his modest background and the luxury around him had never seemed so pronounced. He clenched his fists, tears threatening to spill, feeling the weight of judgment and class divide pressing down on him. He had come only to admire, to dream, to learn, but here, his innocence was being criticized. Harrison stepped closer, his voice calm but authoritative. "Ma'am, the boy means no harm. He's here simply to appreciate the craftsmanship. There's no need for confrontation." The woman, still flustered, waved him off dismissively. "Well, he shouldn't be here. This is a store for paying customers, not kids from the street." Harrison's jaw tightened. He was used to dealing with difficult clients, but this was different. It wasn't about money or business, it was about empathy, respect, and recognizing the value of human curiosity and dreams, regardless of social class. He looked at Ethan, standing small and uncertain, and felt a surge of emotion. Something inside him shifted, a resolve to protect this boy from the harshness of a judgmental world. "Enough," Harrison said firmly, stepping between Ethan and the woman. "This young man is welcome here. If you have a problem with that, perhaps you should reconsider your own perspective." The woman blinked, momentarily stunned into silence. Harrison's authority, calm yet unyielding, was impossible to ignore. She muttered something under her breath and stormed toward the exit, leaving behind a trail of tension in her wake. Ethan exhaled shakily, relief flooding him. He looked up at Harrison, eyes wide. Thank you," he whispered. Harrison smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You're safe here," he said softly. "Never forget that curiosity and appreciation are strengths, not weaknesses." The boy nodded, tears welling up but a small smile breaking through. It was a pivotal moment, a realization that kindness and protection could exist even in spaces dominated by wealth and judgment. Harrison observed quietly, aware that this interaction had not only reinforced Ethan's courage but also awakened something within himself, a recognition of his own privilege and the responsibility it entailed. Once the woman had left, the store returned to its quiet rhythm. Ethan continued exploring, but now with a renewed sense of confidence, knowing he had an ally in Harrison. The subtle connection between them deepened, built not only on admiration but also on trust, protection, and shared humanity. Harrison watched as Ethan knelt to examine a pair of black leather boots, his eyes reflecting wonder and respect. For Harrison, the event was transformative. It was a reminder that wealth alone was meaningless without empathy, that the value of human connection could surpass any material possession. He realized that in shielding Ethan from harsh judgment, he was not only protecting the boy but also rediscovering a piece of his own humanity long buried beneath ambition and success. The afternoon light softened, casting golden hues across the store. Harrison and Ethan remained in silent companionship, the boy exploring and the man observing, both learning from the interaction. The clash with the wealthy customer had underscored the contrasts that defined their worlds: wealth versus poverty, arrogance versus humility, isolation versus connection. Yet through the misunderstanding, a bridge had formed, a subtle bond that neither of them would forget. As Ethan finally prepared to leave, Harrison approached him. "You're brave, you know," he said quietly. "Not many people would face challenges like that and still keep their curiosity alive." Ethan looked up, a mixture of pride and shyness in his expression. I just like learning and seeing things," he admitted softly. "Even if I can't have them, I can still admire them." Harrison nodded, deeply moved. "And that's something very special. Don't ever lose that." As Ethan walked toward the door, clutching his small pouch of coins, Harrison watched him go, feeling a profound sense of responsibility, admiration, and hope. The misunderstanding had tested courage, exposed vulnerabilities, and highlighted the stark contrasts between their worlds, but it had also strengthened the invisible bond between them, laying the foundation for what was to come. The next morning, Cedarwood woke to a soft drizzle, the streets glistening with the sheen of fresh rain. Ethan, as usual, woke early, careful not to wake his mother, and checked the small pouch under his pillow. The few coins inside were all he had, saved over weeks of careful discipline. His dream of visiting the luxury store had not faded; if anything, yesterday's experience had intensified it. The kindness and protection he had felt from Mr. Harrison Marquette lingered in his mind like a warm light in a gray world. As he walked through the quiet streets toward the city, the rhythmic sound of his worn sneakers against the wet pavement mirrored his anticipation. Today, however, he felt a slight unease. He remembered the confrontation with the wealthy customer. The misunderstanding had been frightening. Yet the memory of Harrison stepping in, calmly and firmly, reminded him that not all adults were guided by arrogance or judgment. There were people capable of kindness and protection, even in a world obsessed with status and wealth. When he arrived at Marquette Shoes, the warm light spilling from the entrance welcomed him like a beacon. Harrison was already there, standing near the entrance, observing the store with his usual quiet presence. But today, there was something different in his demeanor, a subtle anticipation, a softness in his eyes that Ethan hadn't noticed before. "Good morning, Ethan," Harrison greeted warmly, his voice carrying a genuine affection. "I'm glad to see you again." Ethan's eyes widened in surprise, a small smile spreading across his face. "Good morning, sir. I mean, Mr. Marquette," he said, adjusting the strap of his backpack nervously. Harrison chuckled softly. "You don't need to be nervous here. You're welcome anytime." Ethan nodded, feeling a flutter of gratitude. As he moved toward the displays, Harrison followed discreetly, keeping a careful distance. The boy's attention was immediately drawn to a pair of bright red sneakers he had admired the day before. His fingers hovered over the leather, and he whispered softly, "They're perfect." Harrison watched him, a growing sense of admiration swelling in his chest. He remembered his own childhood, the pressures, the relentless pursuit of perfection, and the lack of emotional warmth. Ethan's untainted wonder stirred something long dormant inside him. For the first time, he realized that true wealth wasn't measured in money or status, but in empathy, connection, and the joy of giving. Taking a deep breath, Harrison stepped forward. "Ethan," he began gently, "I want to show you something." Ethan looked up, curious and slightly apprehensive. Harrison led him to a private section of the store, one that few customers ever entered. The area was filled with the latest arrivals, including the very sneakers Ethan had been dreaming about. His eyes widened, and a gasp escaped his lips. "These are," Ethan began, unable to find the words. "Yes," Harrison said softly, "and I want you to try them on." Ethan froze, his small hands clutching his backpack straps. I can't. I don't have money. I can't buy them." Harrison smiled warmly. "You're not here to buy. Today, I want you to experience something different. You've admired these shoes with respect and awe. That's more than enough." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes. He knelt to carefully pick up a pair of red sneakers, brushing the dust from their polished surface as if handling a treasure. Harrison watched silently, letting the boy's joy fill the room. There was no judgment, no expectation, only a shared understanding of the value of dreams, admiration, and human kindness. As Ethan laced up the sneakers, he could hardly believe the feeling. The leather was soft, the fit perfect, the sensation almost surreal. For a moment, he imagined walking through cedarwood, not just with shoes, but with confidence, pride, and a sense of belonging in a world that had always seemed out of reach. Harrison observed quietly, feeling a lump in his throat. He realized that generosity, when offered with sincerity and empathy, could create moments of transformation far beyond material value. Ethan's joy was contagious, filling the space with warmth and a sense of possibility. It was a gift, not just to the boy, but to Harrison himself, a reminder that human connection and kindness could transcend wealth, status, and societal barriers. "Thank you, Mr. Marquette," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Harrison replied gently. "Just enjoy the moment, and remember that kindness can always be shared, in big ways or small." Ethan nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks, a mixture of gratitude, wonder, and disbelief. Harrison remained by his side, not as a businessman, but as a mentor, a guide, and a witness to the boy's unbridled joy. For Harrison, this act of generosity marked a turning point. It was more than giving a pair of shoes, it was acknowledging the value of empathy, nurturing dreams, and embracing emotional richness that money alone could never buy. He realized that these moments, these connections, were the true markers of wealth in life. As Ethan walked toward the city streets, now wearing the red sneakers, Harrison felt a quiet pride. The boy's steps were confident yet humble, each stride a testament to hope, perseverance, and the transformative power of kindness. Harrison knew that this simple gesture would leave an imprint on Ethan's life, shaping his understanding of generosity, compassion, and the beauty of human connection. Later that evening, Harrison sat in his office, reflecting on the day. He thought about the contrasts he had witnessed, the boy's modesty against the opulence of the store, humility against wealth, and hope against the backdrop of a challenging life. He realized that the richest experiences often came from emotional generosity, empathy, and recognizing the inherent dignity in others. For Ethan, the experience was nothing short of magical. The red sneakers were more than shoes, they were symbols of possibility, courage, and the knowledge that someone believed in him. That night, as he lay in bed, he traced the outline of the sneakers with his mind, imagining the adventures they would carry him through, and the people who had shown him that hope and kindness could indeed change a life. In that quiet room, lit only by a small bedside lamp, the bond between Ethan and Harrison deepened. It was subtle, emotional, and powerful, a connection built on empathy, generosity, and the shared understanding of what truly matters in life. Harrison, the billionaire, had given more than material value. He had given a moment of transformation, one that would resonate far beyond the polished floors of Marquette shoes. In the weeks that followed, Ethan found himself drawn back to the city and to Marquette shoes. Each visit was no longer just about shoes, it was about the quiet connection he shared with Harrison Marquette. The store, once intimidating and distant, had transformed into a space of possibility, learning, and warmth. For Ethan, it was a sanctuary where curiosity was celebrated, not judged. Harrison, too, felt the change. Watching Ethan navigate the store with awe and humility reminded him of the joys of life he had long neglected. The boy's presence sparked something within him, a gentle warmth and protective instinct that softened his otherwise precise and calculated world. Harrison began to look forward to these visits, anticipating the small, meaningful moments they shared. One afternoon, as soft sunlight streamed through the tall windows, Harrison guided Ethan to a quiet corner of the store filled with vintage shoes and rare collections. "These are special," Harrison said softly, "not just because of their design, but because of the stories they carry." Ethan's eyes widened with curiosity. He knelt before a pair of worn leather boots, running his fingers along the stitched seams. "Did people really wear these?" he asked, awe in his voice. Harrison smiled. "Yes. They walked streets just like these. They chased dreams, faced challenges, and left marks on the world. Every shoe has a story, some of hardship, some of triumph." Ethan listened intently, hanging on every word. It wasn't just a history lesson, it was a lesson in empathy, perseverance, and human spirit. Harrison realized that these moments of storytelling were as transformative for him as they were for Ethan. The boy's wonder made him reflect on his own life, his choices, and the importance of seeing the world through eyes unclouded by wealth or status. As they moved through the store, Harrison subtly encouraged Ethan to touch, explore, and even try on some shoes. Each interaction was a careful balance of guidance and freedom, allowing the boy to experience empowerment without pressure. Ethan began to open up, sharing stories from Cedarwood, tales of his school, his family, and his dreams. Harrison listened, genuinely invested, learning about resilience, hope, and the small joys of ordinary life. One day, Ethan spoke of his mother, who worked tirelessly to keep their household afloat. "She never complains," he said softly. "Even when things are hard, she smiles. She wants me to have hope." Harrison felt a lump in his throat. He thought of his own childhood, the lack of warmth and encouragement, and realized how extraordinary Ethan's resilience was. "You're lucky to have someone like her," Harrison said gently. "And she must be proud of you, too." Ethan nodded, eyes glistening. "I hope so. I just want to make her proud someday." Harrison placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You already do," he said sincerely. "And I can see that you'll continue to make her proud, not through wealth or material things, but through your heart and determination." Their visits became a routine, a bridge between worlds. Harrison began to involve Ethan in small, meaningful decisions in the store, choosing which displays to feature, arranging shoes in ways that told a story, and even writing notes of inspiration for young visitors. These tasks were simple, yet they instilled confidence and a sense of purpose in Ethan. Harrison, in turn, shared insights about life beyond the store. He spoke of challenges he had faced in business, the mistakes that had shaped him, and the importance of integrity and empathy. Ethan absorbed these lessons with reverence, not as commands, but as shared wisdom. The bond between them deepened, rooted in mutual respect, trust, and the quiet joy of human connection. One rainy afternoon, as Ethan tried on a pair of rugged boots, he stumbled slightly. Harrison caught him instinctively, steadying him. "Careful," he said softly, but there was no reprimand, only genuine concern. Ethan looked up, and for the first time, Harrison saw a flicker of trust and comfort in the boy's eyes. It was more than admiration, it was emotional reliance, a bond that transcended age, wealth, and circumstance. Harrison realized that this connection was changing him. He found himself reflecting on his own life, re-evaluating priorities, and embracing vulnerability. The billionaire who had once measured success in profits and accolades now recognized that true wealth lay in relationships, empathy, and the impact one had on another person's life. Ethan, for his part, flourished under this mentorship. His confidence grew, not in arrogance, but in self-belief and the courage to dream. He walked taller, spoke with more assurance, and carried himself with a quiet dignity that reflected the nurturing he had received from Harrison's kindness and attention. One afternoon, as they sat by the store window watching the city rain wash the streets clean, Harrison spoke softly. "Ethan, do you know why I started this store?" Ethan shook his head, curious. "It wasn't just for shoes," Harrison explained. "It was for people to find joy, to experience beauty, and to be reminded that the little things matter." "I think, you're beginning to understand that, aren't you?" Ethan smiled, a shy but radiant grin. "Yes. I think I do." Harrison leaned back, watching the boy trace raindrops on the glass. He realized that the bond they shared had become a mutual gift. Ethan gained confidence, hope, and exposure to a world he had admired from afar, while Harrison rediscovered empathy, humility, and the profound impact of genuine human connection. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship strengthened. Harrison began to see Ethan not just as a boy from a modest background, but as a remarkable individual with curiosity, resilience, and heart. And Ethan began to see Harrison not merely as a wealthy store owner, but as a mentor, protector, and guide who believed in him. Through these interactions, the subtle contrasts that had initially defined their worlds, wealth versus poverty, authority versus humility, and status versus character, transformed into complementary forces, creating a narrative rich with emotional depth, inspiration, and moral lessons. By the time Ethan left the store on a late spring afternoon, the sun casting golden reflections across the polished floors, both he and Harrison knew that their bond had become something extraordinary. It was more than mentorship or admiration, it was a connection rooted in respect, understanding, and shared humanity, one that would shape both their lives in profound ways. It was late afternoon when Harrison found himself alone in his office, the city's skyline glowing with the golden hues of sunset. The store below had quieted down after another day of bustling customers, leaving him with a rare moment of solitude. As he sat in his leather chair, his thoughts drifted once more to Ethan. The boy's unwavering admiration, humility, and resilience had lingered in his mind, refusing to be pushed aside like fleeting distractions. Harrison realized, with a jolt of clarity, that his encounters with Ethan were more than coincidental. The boy was a mirror, a reflection of qualities Harrison had long suppressed: innocence, empathy, and the ability to appreciate life's simple joys. For decades, Harrison had pursued wealth, power, and perfection, measuring success in numbers and accolades. Yet in these quiet afternoons with Ethan, he felt something money had never provided: connection, warmth, and purpose beyond profit. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Memories of his childhood flickered before him, the relentless pressure to excel, the cold expectations, the absence of encouragement or affection. He had built his empire as a fortress, a shield against vulnerability, believing that wealth could compensate for emotional emptiness. But it couldn't. He had been chasing numbers, accolades, and prestige, while the richest experiences, the human ones, had been slipping through his fingers. Harrison opened his eyes and stared out at the city. The streets below teemed with life, each person carrying their own struggles and dreams. He thought about Ethan walking through Cedarwood, dreaming quietly, observing the world with wide-eyed wonder. That small boy had faced hardship, yet his spirit remained unbroken, his heart open. In that contrast, Ethan's modesty and resilience against Harrison's opulence and isolation, Harrison saw a truth he had long avoided: true fulfillment comes not from wealth, but from love, empathy, and meaningful human connection. He rose from his chair and walked toward the store floor. The polished floors reflected the fading sunlight, and Harrison felt a surge of urgency. He needed to act, not as a businessman enforcing rules, but as a human being responding to what his heart had long neglected. He thought about all the lessons Ethan had unwittingly taught him: courage in the face of adversity, humility amidst abundance, and the joy of appreciating life's simple treasures. As he descended the staircase into the main store, Harrison's mind raced with possibilities. How could he extend this connection beyond the fleeting moments of admiration? How could he use his privilege not just for himself, but to nurture, protect, and inspire someone like Ethan? The questions pressed upon him, demanding answers. Harrison approached the display of red sneakers, the very pair Ethan had tried on weeks ago. He picked them up, tracing the leather with his fingers, and felt a wave of nostalgia mixed with resolve. These were more than shoes, they were symbols of dreams, hope, and the power of generosity. He realized that he could create a moment that might transform Ethan's life, an act of kindness that would carry lessons far beyond the material world. Just then, Ethan entered the store, his eyes bright with curiosity, unaware of the plan forming in Harrison's mind. He moved cautiously toward the displays, and Harrison followed, careful to maintain the subtle guidance that had become their routine. The boy's eyes fell on the red sneakers, and a familiar sense of wonder lit up his face. Harrison stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Ethan, may I speak with you for a moment?" Ethan nodded, slightly nervous, and followed him to a quiet corner. Harrison knelt to meet the boy at eye level. "You've shown remarkable patience, humility, and admiration these past weeks," he began. "You see beauty in things most people overlook, and you respect the work and effort behind them. That's rare, Ethan. Very rare." Ethan's eyes widened, a mixture of pride and disbelief washing over him. I like to learn and see things," he whispered. Harrison smiled warmly. "And that's exactly why I want to help you. Not with money, not with fame, but with guidance, opportunity, and a chance to explore your dreams without fear or limitation." The boy's breath caught in his throat. You mean it?" Harrison nodded. "Yes. I believe that everyone deserves a chance to grow, to dream, and to be supported when they show courage and heart. You've earned that chance, Ethan." Ethan's eyes welled up with tears. He had never imagined that someone like Harrison, a billionaire, a figure of immense authority, would see him, truly see him, and offer such kindness. It was overwhelming, emotional, and transformative. The power of generosity, empathy, and recognition hit him all at once. Harrison continued, "I want you to know that the world is full of challenges, but also full of people who can help you navigate them. And I want to be one of those people for you. Not because you're wealthy or privileged, but because your character, your heart, and your curiosity deserve it." The boy's hands trembled slightly as he absorbed the words. He thought of his mother, of the sacrifices she had made, and of the modest life they led in Cedarwood. Yet here was a man who recognized his potential, who valued his dreams, and who offered a bridge between hope and reality. Ethan realized that true kindness can change the trajectory of a life, and that Harrison's gesture was not just about material things, but about belief, trust, and emotional empowerment. Harrison watched Ethan's reaction carefully. He could see the boy's confidence growing, the walls of doubt and insecurity slowly crumbling. For Harrison himself, the moment was transformative. He realized that his wealth and success had been hollow without the ability to touch lives meaningfully, without the capacity for genuine human connection. He extended his hand, a silent invitation for partnership, mentorship, and friendship. "Ethan," he said softly, "let's walk this path together. Let's explore, learn, and grow. You've taught me more than you realize." Ethan grasped Harrison's hand, a firm but respectful grip, and nodded. I would like that very much, he replied, a mixture of gratitude, hope, and newfound courage shining in his eyes. In that quiet corner of Marquette Shoes, beneath the soft glow of the fading sun, two lives intertwined, one a boy with dreams and resilience, the other a billionaire learning the true meaning of wealth. The contrasts that had defined their worlds, poverty and opulence, humility and authority, hope and isolation, merged into a single, profound understanding, that human connection, empathy, and generosity are the richest currencies of all. Harrison's revelation was complete. He understood that the boy's admiration, humility, and courage had awakened a part of him he had long ignored. And Ethan, in turn, felt the first stirrings of belief in himself, a recognition that dreams, guidance, and kindness could indeed overcome obstacles. This turning point marked the beginning of a transformation for both, a journey toward understanding, compassion, and the realization that true richness comes not from wealth, but from heart. As Ethan left the store that evening, wearing his red sneakers with quiet pride, Harrison watched him go, a profound sense of fulfillment washing over him. He knew that their bond was more than temporary, it was a lifelong connection built on empathy, trust, and the shared recognition of human worth. The turning point had arrived, and with it, the promise of hope, transformation, and a story that would resonate far beyond the polished floors of Marquette Shoes. News of Ethan's visits to Marquette Shoes and the unexpected kindness shown by Harrison began to ripple through Cedarwood. At first, it was small whispers among neighbors and shopkeepers, a boy from a modest family, admired and mentored by one of the wealthiest men in the city. Yet as the story spread, it carried a deeper resonance, a tale of empathy, generosity, and the transformative power of human connection. Ethan, usually quiet and reserved, began to notice subtle changes in how people treated him. At school, classmates who once ignored him now greeted him with warmth and curiosity. Teachers noticed a newfound confidence in his demeanor, a quiet strength in the way he spoke, the way he participated in class. Cedarwood's small-town charm amplified the story. People were drawn not only to Ethan's perseverance but to the message of hope and kindness behind it. Harrison, meanwhile, continued to watch Ethan's growth with pride. Each visit to the store became more than a personal connection, it was a reminder of how one act of generosity could echo far beyond the initial gesture. He began involving local community members in small initiatives, mentoring programs, donations to school projects, and workshops where children could explore creativity and craft. Harrison realized that his influence could foster not just individual growth but collective empowerment, bridging gaps between wealth and modest living, opportunity and aspiration. One afternoon, Ethan invited a few friends from school to Marquette Shoes under Harrison's supervision. The boys and girls, curious yet cautious, were amazed by the displays. Harrison guided them gently, encouraging them to explore craftsmanship, creativity, and attention to detail. "Look closely," he said, "every stitch, every design tells a story. Life is like this too, each choice, each effort shapes your path." The children absorbed the lesson eagerly. They saw, through Ethan's example, that admiration and curiosity could open doors previously thought impossible. Harrison's mentorship extended beyond the material, it was about instilling values of humility, respect, and perseverance. At the local school, teachers began to notice a ripple effect. Inspired by Ethan's growth and the story of Harrison's generosity, they incorporated lessons on empathy, resilience, and community support into their classrooms. Students engaged in projects that focused on helping others, understanding diverse experiences, and appreciating the value of human connection. Ethan, always shy, emerged as a quiet leader, encouraging his peers to dream, help, and learn. Meanwhile, Harrison reflected on the broader impact. He understood that wealth without purpose could be isolating, but when aligned with empathy, it became a force for transformation. By mentoring Ethan and indirectly inspiring the community, Harrison witnessed the power of example, kindness, and shared human experience. His business had always been about luxury and prestige, but now it also served as a beacon of hope and moral guidance. One day, a local journalist visited Cedarwood, intrigued by the story of the boy and the billionaire. The article painted a vivid picture: a small-town child, dreaming quietly amid hardship, and a man of immense means, offering mentorship and opportunity. The story emphasized contrasts: wealth versus modesty, aspiration versus limitation, but ultimately highlighted the unifying power of empathy, courage, and human kindness. Ethan read the article with quiet pride. He felt both humbled and inspired. It wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about understanding the significance of small, intentional acts of generosity. The red sneakers, the guidance, and the time Harrison had given him symbolized something far greater: belief in potential, validation of dreams, and the strength to pursue them despite obstacles. In Cedarwood, the effect was tangible. Neighbors offered small acts of support to one another, helping with chores, tutoring, or simply listening. Local businesses began sponsoring youth programs and workshops, motivated by the story of Harrison and Ethan. The community embraced a culture of kindness, encouragement, and collective growth, demonstrating how a single bond could spark widespread change. Ethan's mother, witnessing the positive transformation in her son and the community, felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had always taught Ethan about hope, resilience, and integrity, but now she saw these lessons amplified through mentorship and kindness. The synergy of family values and community support created a nurturing environment that reinforced the importance of empathy, guidance, and moral responsibility. Harrison, observing from the store, recognized the culmination of his own transformation. He realized that his life, once defined solely by business success, had gained richness, purpose, and emotional depth through his bond with Ethan and the resulting community impact. He understood that true legacy was not wealth, but the lives touched, lessons imparted, and hope inspired. The story of Ethan and Harrison became a touchstone in Cedarwood, a modern tale reminiscent of classic American values: perseverance, community, mentorship, and compassion. Families shared it as a moral lesson, schools used it as an example of character building, and children looked to it for inspiration. It was more than a story, it was a guiding light for a town embracing its collective humanity. By the end of this period, Ethan had grown into a confident, thoughtful young boy, aware of his responsibilities and potential. Harrison had evolved into a man who understood that wealth, when paired with empathy, could transform not only individual lives but entire communities. Together, their bond illustrated the profound impact of guidance, recognition, and human connection, showing that hope, kindness, and perseverance could bridge any divide. As the sun set over Cedarwood, casting a warm glow over the town, Harrison and Ethan stood outside the store, watching children play in the streets. They exchanged a quiet smile, acknowledging a shared understanding. Their journey had become something larger than themselves, inspiring hearts, shaping futures, and reaffirming the power of human goodness. Months had passed since Harrison first noticed Ethan in Marquette shoes. In that time, the boy had grown, not only in confidence and knowledge, but in understanding the importance of perseverance, empathy, and humility. Cedarwood had begun to recognize his journey, celebrating the subtle, yet powerful, impact of his story. Harrison, too, had changed profoundly, having discovered the emotional depth that comes from meaningful human connection. One morning, Harrison invited Ethan and his mother to a special event at the store, a recognition ceremony that he had quietly arranged to honor not only Ethan's resilience, but also the spirit of community and shared growth. The store had been transformed with modest decorations, banners that read, "Celebrating Courage and Kindness," and tables adorned with simple flowers. The atmosphere was intimate and warm, reflective of the values Harrison wanted to highlight. Ethan's mother, her eyes glistening with pride, held her son's hand tightly. "This is all for you, Ethan," she whispered. "You've worked so hard, and now everyone is seeing it." Ethan swallowed nervously, feeling a mix of excitement and humility. He glanced around, noticing neighbors, teachers, and friends gathered to witness the celebration. The story of the poor boy and the billionaire had become more than an anecdote, it had evolved into a symbol of hope, perseverance, and the power of human kindness. Harrison stepped forward to address the gathering. His voice, calm yet commanding, filled the room. "We are here today not to celebrate wealth, or status, or material achievements," he began. "We are here to celebrate courage, perseverance, and the human spirit. And there is no better example of that than Ethan." Ethan's cheeks flushed with embarrassment and gratitude. The applause that followed was not just recognition of his personal journey, but a reflection of the collective admiration of a community that valued integrity and heart over superficial measures of success. Harrison continued, "I have learned something invaluable from Ethan. I have learned that wealth is hollow without connection, that guidance and mentorship are far more meaningful than profit, and that kindness can transform lives, sometimes in ways we never expect." Ethan's mother wiped a tear from her cheek. She felt an overwhelming sense of relief and pride, knowing that her son's character, nurtured through both family values and Harrison's guidance, had inspired not only their family but an entire town. Harrison then turned to Ethan, handing him a small certificate of recognition. "This is a token of the growth you've shown, Ethan. Not just in courage, but in understanding what it means to dream, to persevere, and to inspire others. You are a testament to the power of hope." Ethan accepted it with trembling hands, his heart swelling with gratitude. The certificate was more than paper, it symbolized the acknowledgement of his journey, his efforts, and the impact of genuine mentorship. As the ceremony concluded, the children present were invited to share their experiences and reflections. Several of them spoke about how Ethan's story inspired them to help others, work harder in school, and approach life with curiosity and empathy. Teachers expressed admiration for the boy's character and for Harrison's commitment to using his influence for the good of the community. The story had become a living, breathing lesson in morality, resilience, and human connection. Harrison observed quietly, a deep sense of fulfillment settling over him. He realized that recognition was not about personal accolades, it was about creating opportunities for others to shine, to learn, and to grow. Ethan's journey had sparked a ripple effect, motivating families, children, and educators alike to embrace values that mattered most: empathy, perseverance, and generosity. Later that day, Harrison and Ethan walked through Cedarwood together, their footsteps echoing softly on the wet pavement after a brief rain. The streets felt alive with possibility, and the townspeople greeted them warmly, their respect and admiration evident in every interaction. Harrison could see that Ethan's confidence had grown, not into arrogance, but into a quiet strength and dignity that came from understanding one's worth and the impact of integrity. Ethan turned to Harrison, a small smile on his face. "Thank you, sir," he said. "For everything. For teaching me about kindness, for believing in me, and for helping me see that dreams can come true." Harrison nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "You've taught me just as much, Ethan. You reminded me what truly matters in life: heart, courage, and the willingness to make a difference. I'm proud of you." The bond between them, once tentative and shaped by contrasts of wealth and modesty, had blossomed into a relationship of mutual respect, inspiration, and deep emotional resonance. Harrison had grown not just as a businessman, but as a person. Ethan had grown not just as a boy, but as a young individual ready to embrace life with hope, courage, and humility. That evening, as the store closed and the last rays of sunlight faded over Cedarwood, Harrison reflected on the journey. He had begun with curiosity, observing a boy in his store, and had been led to an awakening, a profound understanding that true legacy is measured not in wealth, but in lives touched, hearts inspired, and kindness shared. Ethan, back home, sat by the window and gazed at his red sneakers, a symbol of dreams realized, hope nurtured, and human connection experienced. He thought of the journey ahead, of the challenges he might face, but also of the unwavering support, guidance, and belief he now carried with him. The moral was clear: perseverance, humility, and empathy could overcome obstacles, inspire communities, and transform lives. Through recognition, growth, and the shared bond between mentor and mentee, the story reached its emotional peak. Cedarwood had witnessed more than a tale of wealth and poverty. It had embraced a narrative that celebrated the best of human nature, the triumph of kindness over judgment, and the transformative power of hope and generosity. As Harrison closed the store that night, he glanced at the polished floors and the displays that had once represented only luxury and status. Now, they symbolized something far greater, a place where dreams were nurtured, lives were touched, and hearts were inspired. And in that quiet, reflective moment, he knew that this was the true measure of his wealth, a richness far beyond numbers, fame, or possessions.